is that if I don't set boundaries, then I won't be able to have a healthy relationship with people, and it won't be mutually beneficial for us.
So not just my case, but one of the things I noted is that people struggle to have boundaries because they don't really have a reason to have them. They don't have something they value enough to protect. Let's say a purpose or a vision or something that they've built or something that they're building. All right, guys, welcome to this live with me, Jabu Zwane, Mindset Talk. I'm actually with a good friend of mine. We've known each other now for over 13 years. When I first met him, I keep on saying that he doesn't like it, but it was like only about 20 years, probably 19. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think I was.
Yeah, he was quite young
19.
at the time. And since then, I met him as a pastor at that church. And he's actually the young man that has taken over the church that I was pastoring for a very long time. So I've known him for a very long time. I've known him before he was married, when he was still quite skinny, bones sticking out of his face. I did his premarital counseling. I continued to have a very strong relationship with him and his wife. Did the dedication of the babies. Of the babies. They've got twins. And he recently actually just left his full-time work to become a full-time CEO of Oxano 7. So you guys keep on following the page again. And at some point, I'm going to have a chat with him also about how is he transitioning from being a full-time pastor to currently being a full-time business person, a father, a husband, and the many different roles that he occupies. So welcome, Pastor Gerold Joubert.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This is a nice surprise. We didn't plan for this today, but it's awesome you planned for it. I didn't plan for this, so it's great. Thank you so much for having this chat with me, and I'm excited to see where this conversation goes.
Yeah, I didn't really so much plan for it. It's just one of those things that I woke up in the morning. I woke up to a slew of SMSs for a very close relative of mine. And it was actually a behavior that has been lingering in our relationship for a very long time, which actually made it, I was like, today is the day I need to nip this situation, because it had created a very uncomfortable feeling for me in terms of my relationship with them, because they just didn't seem to get it that there has to be boundaries as far as this particular thing is concerned. I'm not going to talk about what it is exactly, but then it triggered for me then the need for us to have a discussion about setting up healthy boundaries. So we're going to be looking at that from the point of relationships, of course, personal relationships, romantic relationships, business relationships, sibling relationships, and also friendships.
Exciting.
So I think it's crucial, because I found that actually that's a need that many people have. A lot of people that I know, that I coach, that I counsel, especially a lot of counseling has a lot to do with that struggle, that human struggle, the struggle to articulate your boundaries and to articulate them quite strongly.
That's true. I think a lot of us, we think that by not communicating our boundaries, we are keeping the relationship safe and healthy, when actually it has the opposite effect.
Oh, okay. Say a bit more about that.
Well, I'm just thinking about my own life. You know how in the past, before I knew about boundaries and how important they are, that I would be scared to communicate to people exactly how I feel about certain things, or certain things that are overstepping certain boundaries. And I wouldn't say them because I thought that not saying them was more beneficial for the relationship. If I said it, then somehow the relationship would be dented by that conversation, or maybe they won't receive it well. Maybe they'll get upset at me and get angry at me, and then they won't want to talk to me. And so it was difficult to communicate those boundaries, because I was afraid of how they would respond to that. And but actually later realized that not communicating those boundaries early on was a big mistake, and it actually meant that the relationship suffered more and it became harder and harder over time to communicate those boundaries, because now this habit or this thing that somebody does, we can call it a habit, continued for a long time, and now it's become part of the relationship and it's been accepted as this is okay.
Sure.
And now after, let's say, 5 years, 3 years, whatever, now I come and I say, hey, you can't do this. It's like, what? And that's weird. Like this has been in the relationship for such a long time. Why is this a problem now? Yeah. So just thinking that, that idea that communicating boundaries is detrimental to relationships is not true. It's actually the opposite that is true.
It's fascinating because I've known you for a long time, and I'm actually a little bit surprised to hear that you struggle with setting up your boundaries, because I thought, man, you can say your no quite well.
Well, I used to struggle a lot with that, like especially in the early days in the church, in my corporate career. Like that was difficult. Even in marriage, it was difficult in the beginning because I was, I think, a little bit more of a people pleaser, and I wanted to make sure that I felt secure in the fact that people liked me. And sometimes we don't communicate boundaries because we don't want to be disliked by people. But then when you grow up and you mature more, you just don't care anymore that much, to be honest. You value people, but you also realize that if I don't set boundaries, then I won't be able to have a healthy relationship with people, and it won't be mutually beneficial for us.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, in terms of transitioning, out of 10, how were you into pleasing people compared to now? If you give me the score between the two.
You're scoring now. I would say I was probably a 9 or a 10.
Wow.
No, 8 or a 9, not a 10. That's weird. But definitely high. I mean, it's subconsciously you do that.
Yeah.
It's not that you decide I'm going to please people. It's just in the way that you make decisions, the way that you treat people. And I think especially if you grew up in maybe a family or in an environment where you did not have a lot of friends or you did not have good relationships.
Was that your setting?
In some settings, my family was okay. Like a little bit of we can say a broken family. My parents divorced early, but my dad remarried, and my stepmom she's still a very amazing mom, and no problem there. Our family was good. But I think at school and early on in my workplace, I struggled to build strong relationships with people, and so I was scared to lose the ones I had, and that's why you fall into people pleasing. Even not knowing that that's what you're doing. And then at some point you just realize, I can't do this anymore. Like this is not working. It's not working for them because I'm not really being myself. And it's not working for me because I'm pretentious and I'm trying to keep up this idea of who I'm supposed to be, but it's not who I am.
Yeah.
And so I can't bring my full value to the table because I'm living another identity, or I'm behaving differently than what I naturally should.
Okay. And is there a particular relationship that you can point to that we can say perhaps was a turning point for you?
I don't know if there was a particular relationship. I mean, our friendship kind of helped with that a lot, learning how to communicate between you and me. I mean, I think we are at a place where we can communicate clearly, we can set boundaries clearly. It's quite a mature friendship, so it's good and healthy, and I learned a lot from that. But I don't think there was a particular relationship. I think it was more just maybe even God showing me that this is what's happening, and me needing to make a decision that I need to be okay with being myself. And if people don't want to be around me because I'm me, then that's okay.
Say that again.
I don't want to be. I don't want to live with the burden of trying to be someone else, because that's too much of a weight to carry. Especially as you get older, you just realize this is too much. So at some point, you get to accept yourself and who God has made you to be, and even the things that you're still working on, and you need grace for every day. And then you just start working and growing at those things. I think there was a big shift for me was like 2017, 2018. I think that was around the time also you started like really changing your perspective and your life in many areas. And it was like one day I didn't wake up, but it's like my eyes open and I was like, you know what, God, like I think I need to stop, trying to be who I'm not. Like it's almost like it just dawned on me, like you were like, oh, wow, I've not been myself. I'm trying so hard to be someone I'm not. And so when you live like that, communication is very difficult because you can't say what you're thinking. Not that saying what you think is always a good thing immediately, but you can't express yourself because you're filtering everything that you're saying based upon what you think people want to hear or what they want to see. So then you remove the masks and the filters and you start to be yourself, and then you can grow because now you can work on you, not on the persona, but you can work on yourself and say, okay, wow, this area of myself, really, I'm not good with this. I need to work on this. I need to grow in this area. But as long as you're pretentious and trying to please people, you can't work on yourself.
Sure. I think that's important. I mean, I think I want to bring out a little bit of my own struggle with that as well, because I totally agree with you. I could agree with a couple of things. I agree with the fact that it's a burden to try and be something that you're not, to be somebody that you're not. It's actually tragic in a couple of ways. It's tragic in the sense that you never get to fully experience who you really are. And as a result, you can never get to a point where you appreciate who you really are. And at the point, and also you'll never get to a place where you become confident in who you are. And that basically means also you are cutting your potential short. Because for as long as you're not fully who you are, not confident in who you are, you can never be confident in your skills as well.
Yeah.
And if you're not confident in your skills are not able to yield for you the best outcomes as far as your lives are concerned. And I found that was actually my case. It's interesting that you bring out that time more or less in 2017 when I started to really interrogate quite a lot that concerns my life, after the tragedy. Because I realized at a particular point in my life that actually, there's something sad. There's a sadness in my life, in the way that I existed. I felt like it was sad that I couldn't fully express myself, especially the struggles that I was going through. Because there seemed to be a certain expectation for me to be a certain way by certain people. And I was daily haunted with the thoughts of I need to be someone, I need to be this, I need to keep up, I need to keep to this image. I actually remember a conversation that I had with somebody quite close also in the ministry, another pastor as well, who said to me, I'm kind of confused about what's going on with you, because I'm used to you being this hero of our faith, somebody who's just able to you've been doing so well. He says, you've been doing so well since the passing of your wife, and now you're changing, and I don't know what to do with the fact that you're changing. And I thought about that. I'm like, you know what? Actually, he just articulated exactly what's going on and exactly the kind of comment that I feared people would make. But now that he has just said it, it didn't bother me, because I realized, actually, this is what I need to do.
Yeah.
And I need to do it for me. I needed to do it for me so that I would have less resentment, because I was becoming a bit resentful of the people around me. And I think I've shared this quite a few times, where I kind of saw myself having a bit of an attitude to quite a few people in the church, because I felt like, why in the world would they not figure out like what's going on with me? You know what I mean? So in thinking about that, I'm just wondering, in terms of your learning, what specifically would you say you've learned that was not there before when you struggling with your setting up your boundaries? Are there specific skills that you have learned that helps you now to be able to say no if you need to say no?
I think a big one is really understanding the nature of relationships, and also being okay with disagreeing with people sometimes, not being afraid of conflict, because conflict, I think that was maybe one of the more major things in my life that drove me to become people pleasing, is that I avoided conflict at all costs. I didn't like it, any type of conflict.
Yeah.
And then at some point it was like, conflict is healthy in certain circumstances. Like it's good because we can communicate these things. So the nature of relationships needs to be understood, that my relationship with people cannot be only from a place where it is what they want it to be, or that I have to be who they are, and if I'm not, then this relationship won't exist. So approaching people from just the freedom of allowing yourself to be you, but also caring for people enough to be willing to explain yourself to them, so that they can get to know you more.
Can you say a bit more about that one, about that point of saying, caring enough about people to explain yourself to them?
Yeah, so because like you get the two extremes, right? Either you try to please people to the point where you are exactly what they expect of you, so you don't need to explain anything because that's what they expected. Or there's the other extreme is I am who I am, don't judge me, leave me alone. I'm just going to do this thing, or I'm just doing my thing, I'm being me. And if you can't accept me, then just deal with it. But that doesn't help either. So there's a necessity of communicating, like why am I doing this? What is my thoughts behind this? What is my intentions? You are still important to me. Just because I don't agree with you does not mean that this relationship needs to end or that you're not important to me. And being okay with being uncomfortable for sometimes, I think, like even in our friendship, there was many times where we had uncomfortable conversations, and being okay with that and not feeling like, oh, now the friendship is in jeopardy because we had an uncomfortable conversation about something or we disagreed on something. So can the relationship mature enough so that we have a platform where we can set boundaries, where we can talk about things that we don't agree on, where we can explore things that maybe we can learn from each other, and not just you're on that side, I'm on this side, and we keep it that way.
Sure.
So it's I think it's so important to just to be okay with explaining, even if you don't understand yourself sometimes, but giving people time to ask questions and to interrogate if they must your intentions. But because sometimes you don't understand, even like I do something or I am a certain way, but I can't explain it. It's just the way I am, or this is just the road I'm walking and I'm still learning it myself. So then that conversation gives you room also to investigate even your own intentions and to start to think about them a little bit more. So that's good. And then you can start to set boundaries because you understand where they need to be.
Yeah.
Whereas when you are just pretending to be someone, you don't even know where the boundaries are supposed to be, because you're just living on that far side of the far edge of this is not me. When I'm with this person, I'm someone else. So really there doesn't have to be boundaries because I am inside their bubble, if that makes sense at all.
I like that. I like what you just said now. Because sure. And just reflecting back again to the point you've made earlier, but actually before I do that, let me quickly read some comments here and then see if we have any questions for you or for me. Let's see, in terms of the questions, okay, good afternoon Butumelo, good afternoon guys. I see Jamie, Lombe, Chichi, everybody's online. How are you, my darling? They're greeting each other, fantastic. Okay, and I really need to respect my boundaries. That's Prince saying that. And we can talk a little bit about that, like how do we respect our boundaries? Because I think it's a crucial component of honoring yourself.
Yes.
And it becomes very difficult then to respect your boundaries if you don't know who you are. And let's say in my particular case, or rather, not just my case, but one of the things I noted is that people struggle to have boundaries because they don't really have a reason to have them. They don't have something they value enough to protect. Let's say purpose or a vision or something that they've built or something that they're building. We can talk a little bit about that. Like, what are some of the things you can put in place to ensure that you have sort of a point of reference for setting your boundaries? Okay, let's see. We have Chichi saying failure to set boundaries start when you start overthinking what people will do, will say about you. And that's exactly what you said. Like that obsession or that over concern about what people would say versus what you've just mentioned now about caring to explain, caring enough for people who are close to you to explain yourself, which I'll cover from my side quickly. And we've got Bitumela saying, I initially struggled with setting and maintaining healthy boundaries myself. I wonder now what it's like for you. And then we have, my body feels really anxious or a bit numb when I keep boundaries. I've said, wow, that's deep. And it feels so foreign. Oh, wow, there's a whole psychology and a biology behind that.
Boundaries require courage, eh?
They do require
you need to stand
courage.
your ground.
And she say, when setting boundaries, be clear, specific, and be firm and direct. Do not negotiate. And do not apologize. I like that. I like how that she's come to that point. But I'm talking about caring enough to explain yourself. I remember with me, I mean, there's a point where I say, you know what, I need to explain to these people what's going on. That's where our uncomfortable conversations were around, this is what I'm currently doing, this is what I'm currently going on, this is what I'm exploring. And I was not very shy to say, I'm not sure of how everything's going to play out.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't think I necessarily know entirely what I'm doing. All I know is that I have to explore my life in this way so that I can come to a place of my own comfort as well.
Yes.
Because exactly what she's saying, I was uncomfortable. I really had a uncomfortable feeling in my body, in my biology, sensation on the right side of my head, of my head. That some numbness even to the degree that was happening, constantly being in a biological state where there's fogginess, a lack of concentration, a lack of remembering things, a jumpiness that was going on because I was anxious about all of these conversations that I needed to have with people. But it wasn't until I remember one particular conversation with someone very, very close to me. It took probably 3 or 4, 2, 3 hour intensive conversations where I was like, I remember one time I said to him, I have something very important to say to you, and I need you to be quiet. And if you can't be quiet, then we're not going to have the conversation. And they were like, what? What are you talking about? Of course. I'm like, listen, I'm going to say it again because I can see that you are not listening to what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I've known you long enough to know when you're paying attention. I'm going to say it again. I have something very important to say to you regarding what's going on and what I'm uncomfortable with and what I'd like to see happen with our relationship. If you can't be quiet up until I am done, we're not going to have a conversation. It's like, okay. And then we started having the conversation. And of course, as we're having conversation, interruptions. I said to him, what did I say in the beginning? I did say to you that if you cannot be quiet, we can't have this conversation. But I'm like, I told you, I've got something important to say. And I said specifically, this is what normally happens when we have a conversation. You interrupt me, you hijack the conversation, and then you try to give me advice. I'm not interested in your advice. I need you to understand where I am.
Yeah.
And that way, you can best advise me once you've heard everything, not because you think you know what I'm going to say. Can you do that?
I'm sure that was not easy to say.
It was not easy. It was not easy to say.
Yeah.
It was not easy to say. But I remember I had to say that for several times.
Yeah.
And then finally, one of the final conversations where a breakthrough was had, he said to me, I realize now I have to learn how to be your friend differently. I realize many of the things that where I used to find value in our relationship will no longer be there. Now I've got to find a different way of being your friend and in fact of being your leader. I was like, I think we both have to explore that because I don't know what it's going to look like, but we can both have the courage to do that.
It's amazing that, even like that conversation, even though like most of us, and I'm sure even yourself, like that conversation makes us scared, because we're afraid to lose maybe that friendship, especially if it's somebody important. But having that conversation, setting those boundaries actually resulted in that relationship maturing and growing, which is so important because some relationships stagnate because we are just being pretentious. We are just pleasing, each other with who we think we should be, but then we know no one is really themselves, and so we don't get to know each other, so the relationship does not develop. So it's amazing how it's like boundaries really form the walls, like a river, like a wall guides the river, as it should go. The bound, the bank, whatever bank, if you call it, the rubber banks. And I think a lot of boundaries, like they are so important because they guide our relationships in the way that they need to grow and develop, so that they develop in healthy directions and not in unhealthy directions. But that's great, that what you're saying, that actually that relationship, I'm sure, like, what is that relationship like now?
It's grown into a more engaging relationship, and it's stopped being sort of like a one-way relationship where I was constantly the recipient of advice and of counsel, where there wasn't really place for my voice in the relationship. Because it started off that way. Person is older than me, been part of my life for a long time, so I depended a lot on them for wisdom, for guidance, and I would come to them a lot in terms of my important decisions. But for this particular decision, I realized that they're not necessarily oriented correctly in terms of giving me advice, since they've not necessarily experienced what I was going through. And I understood also, it's also part of my own becoming.
Sure.
Part of my own becoming was that I needed to learn to make my own decisions and not consult necessarily to be told what to do, but actually consult as a way of, negotiate, as a way of dialogue, as a way of debriefing, and as a way of just validating and assessing whether some of the ideas that I have can work or not. But that's a whole different story altogether versus coming to a person then looking for to be told what needs to be, what you should do. And I think that's part of the need, as you mentioned, about the maturity of the relationship.
Yeah.
Is that as the relationship matures, there's got to be an ownership of what that relationship has made both of you to be, and the testing out of that investment. Whether it's the investment of wisdom, of truth, of lessons, whatever. The person that has been taught, that has been learning, there's got to be a point where they've got to prove that they've learned what they've learned.
Yeah.
But also the person who has taught, there's got to be a point where they've got to allow for the lessons that the other person has learned to be part of the dynamic of the relationship.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Something that we call in our Christianity a mature spiritual child. You know what I mean? And I think that's pretty much even with parents, for example. Most parents struggle to get to that point.
Yeah.
They struggle to get to the point where they can respect their children's decisions in terms of deciding who they're going to marry, careers they're going to take, places where they're going to go and sit, where they're going to go and stay, and many other decisions. And then they want to have a lot of say in terms of, no, you can't marry that girl, or you can't go do that career. Especially if you've had very strong parents that have been very present, that have had a very big voice in your life. I find that a lot of people that have had that, as much as it has been great for them as far as giving them guidance and giving them a structure of stability, but there's a point where there's a lot of stress between them and their parents, because the parents just cannot respect some of the decisions that they're making, and they don't know how to hold their ground with their parents.
Yeah.
It could be even a pastor.
Yes.
For the people that we've discipled, spiritually speaking.
This is an interesting point, because it's like, as when relationships develop and mature, boundaries also need to develop and mature and change. Like boundaries are not stagnant. They are not just boundaries is not something that you put down and that's it forever. But boundaries shift and move as the relationship develops. Think about, like, as you're growing, you need new clothes all the time. You can't just wear the old clothing all the time, because that won't fit you anymore and will strangle your growth. So maybe you can lose an arm if you don't change your shirt. But it's like I'm just listening to what you're describing, like going back to your conversation with the other person, and like you had matured as a person, like you were in a process of, like, you've been growing, and now you've reached like a new season, a new phase in your life and in your growth. And that meant that the way that relationship works changed, but maybe nobody realized it at that point, and suddenly the old boundaries just didn't fit anymore. And that's how you start to realize, oh wow, okay, the relationship has changed, so we need to change the boundaries as well. And like you were mentioning, parents with children, I think about my children, as they grow up, we have to set more boundaries. Like, okay, you need to dress in your own room, the you can't take baths together anymore. Like these, like even though like when it's like as the children grows, there needs to be boundaries, not only to protect them, but to give them the freedom to learn and to mature on their own. I like what you said. Yeah, like you have to set boundaries to let go, but then also they receive more boundaries so that they understand how the relationship has to work now. And then there's other boundaries in relationships where when the relationship grows, there are less boundaries in certain areas. Think about like a marriage, right? In an intimate relationship. In the beginning, when you are dating, there's a lot of boundaries. Well, before you date, there's a lot of boundaries. You know, like, don't touch me, weirdo. Who are you? And then and as the relationship grows closer and closer together between a man and a woman, and then they get married, and then there's new boundaries. Like now, some of those boundaries have shifted. They're no longer between the two people, but now it's around them. So, okay, now this marriage is sacred. There's a new boundary here now. And then that changes even the way that you have to relate to your friends, for example, because now your friends can't just show up at your house anymore.
Exactly.
So
when
now
you're married,
new
absolutely.
Don't do that. So now there's new boundaries that need to be set again. So I'm just enjoying thinking about this. It's like boundaries are evolving as relationships grow.
Yeah, and it's actually a bit sad that we actually have now a word for it, where it actually should just be the natural process of just development and growing and maturity. Because, I mean, ultimately, the more that we mature, the more that we change, the more that we see things differently. And if we are all growing together in an ecosystem, we all have to be aware of some of those changes and realize certain things have shifted with the children, as you've mentioned. But I'm actually thinking, especially around, let's take our focus a bit more towards the relationships. And before I do that, let me quickly just read a few comments here. We have somebody saying, okay, well, I've read that. We're setting boundaries. Okay, I think I've read that with Chichi as well. Let me go down. Okay, Chichi is saying, when setting these boundaries, expect resistance and don't let it deter you. That's a good advice. Remember, setting boundaries is an ongoing process. So set boundaries for your own well-being, not to control. Absolutely. Not to control others. That's very sane advice. Again, sage advice. Somebody saying, please elaborate about having the courage, about the biology and feeling anxious in your body. I'll talk to that just now quickly. And daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love yourself and even risk disappointing others. Absolutely. And then Bitumele saying, I suppose in response to your comments about the children, I also teach my kids to set boundaries, even with me, vice versa. In terms of biology, the way that I saw present in my body, of course, was the tension. It was that fear of how the other person is going to respond, and some of the things you've mentioned. There's fear of the outcome of that conversation. Does it change our relationship to the point where maybe it ends? Does it change to the point where we are going to have struggle relating with each other? And that whole tension in your mind creates like those chemicals in your body. And that pressure on your body that literally you start having heart palpitations even at the thought of having that tough conversation with certain people. Whether it be that you need to set boundaries with your boss at work. They've been overworking you, but they're not paying you overtime. And they keep on adding more work, but nobody's saying anything about increasing your money.
Sure.
But then the more that you allow them to give you more work, the more work they give you and the more they devalue you, the more they don't even respect the fact that you're doing so much, which is quite fascinating to me.
That can be difficult, especially if you've been working that way for a while and now you want to change that because the expectation is already there. Like I remember when I started in corporate, when did I start there? 2010. I made a very conscious decision where I said to myself that I will not take work home. I'm not going to be available after hours. Because I specifically knew that there were certain other things, responsibilities that I had to take care of. Even though I wasn't married back then, it was very important for me to set those boundaries. And because they were set on early, it was easy for me to maintain them because people knew that's how I operate. But I can imagine it's difficult, having to approach your boss when that's how it's been going, and now you have to speak up. It can be very difficult, and it's understandable that you're going to feel anxious and even scared of the outcome of that conversation. But if you don't have that conversation, it will just get worse and worse.
It's just going to get worse. And that's part of what we're going to cover in our workshop, right? On the 24th of February. So this is the gentleman, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be part of the workshop. And it's going to be at this place here in Menlyn. So I'm actually at the venue right now. This is the studio for the podcast. So on the 24th of February, remember, we're going to have our Become an Articulate Communicator workshop. And part of what we're going to be covering is communicating your boundaries. So there are going to be 4 key things that we're going to cover in there. We're going to be covering, of course, communicating your boundaries, communicating from a point of power, and communicating your value. We're going to be speaking about high-stakes negotiation as well. How do you orient yourself to have a difficult conversation? So don't be confused when I say high-stakes negotiation, you're thinking it's about negotiating with terrorists. Although some people can feel like terrorists. But we're going to be using certain tactics in terms of communicating with people who are tough negotiators, who have strong boundaries and don't move from their point, and they want other people to always move, but they're never the ones to move. So how do you learn how to just negotiate tough for yourself, and of course negotiating with confidence? So that's part of what we'll be speaking about. Remember, it's on www.𝐷𝐒𝐿𝐿7.com, 𝐷𝐒𝐿𝐿7, AUXONO 7, SEVEN 7.com. And the tickets they're going pretty fast. So we only have a limited seating at the venue of 100 people. And then the rest of the people will have to be watching online. 750 for in-person, and then 500 Rand for virtual session. Okay, so, and let's move on to the two relationships as time is going here. I think one of the greatest challenges as a counselor, I find that a lot whenever people are coming to my counseling, desk, one of the biggest struggles is uncommunicated expectations. And because of that, most of the time it's actually uncommunicated boundaries. Yeah. And people have certain boundaries and desires that they desire for their partner to honor. Honor even as far as intimacy is concerned, even the type of activities that they do intimacy-wise, as far as time spent together, as far as intimacy, as far as even talking to each other. Yep. I'm very sensitive to how people talk to me. Very, very sensitive to how people talk to me, because I understand what a mannerism in talking to people means, at least as far as my own understanding is concerned. And I found that it was very difficult for me in my marriage to say, listen, I don't particularly appreciate the way that you are talking to me at the moment. It's it's kind of confusing to me when you are yelling and screaming or calling me titles that. For me, if somebody calls me, let's say, for example, if somebody says to me, I'm a liar, it's a character. It's a character attack. It's a character assassination. And I know in the back of my mind, there's no way that I would want to have a long-term sustainable relationship with somebody that I think is a liar. So, and then seeking clarity and say, listen, if you're saying to me, I'm a liar because I lied, we need to talk about that. Or you think I have lied, not even say I've lied, but you think I have lied and you're calling me a liar. For me, it's a problem when you're attaching a label to me that characterizes me no longer as a human being, but as a thing. Because the moment you're saying you are a liar, then you move from being a human being that I have to honor and respect to a thing.
Yeah, a criminal.
You start going into that whole thing conversation where you say, this person. Yeah. In our language, you have hello mundulo. You hear somebody speaking about their partner saying lona.
This one.
Like this one. I mean, then you no longer have that person of value. Yeah. So I mean, what would you say would be let's start with, have you ever had any struggles yourself in your romantic relationship, in your marriage? You don't have to disclose details in terms of communicating your boundaries. And if so, how have you learned to overcome that? How are you navigating that?
Yeah, I mean, there will always be those struggles because, like we said, as the relationship grows, there's always the discovery that there needs to be new kind of boundaries, or boundaries need to move based upon the relationship. So I mean, some of them you realize too late, or not too late, but you realize them much later. You're like, oh, okay, this, I think we need a boundary here. You know, this is where we need to fix this, or we need to move this boundary, or we need to talk about certain things. And I think it's important to be able to sit down and to value the person and to value the relationship enough to have an honest conversation about your expectations, and to be willing also to change some of those expectations, because not all expectations are good. And not every expectation that you have is your right or even is okay to have. And so you have to sit down and be able to communicate, okay, these are my expectations, this is what I'm thinking, and this is not easy to talk about this. And then the other person can also talk about their expectations, and then you have to find the middle ground, because it's never going to be 100%. You can't live like that, because okay, you do everything I want and then I'll do everything you want, but it's some of those things, they clash. And so that's where we have to set boundaries to, okay, you can expect this much from me, but I'm not doing that. I can't spend this much time with you, or I can't, you can't expect me to get home and then just to, be like ready. How we communicate, when we communicate, how much do we communicate at a time, like those things are important. And even other boundaries, like, for example, how do we fight? Like, that sounds weird, but that's important. Like, if we get into an argument, is it okay if you call me names, or if you bring up the past? Like, where do we draw the line? Where do we put these boundaries to ensure that our relationship is being kept safe even when there is conflict? So in our home, we have, between me and my wife, we have very clear boundaries when it comes to disagreements. Like, we don't talk to each other when we are angry or when we are emotional. We wait until we've calmed down and we can think clearly about the matter, and then we make time to talk about it, and we don't leave things unattended to, because that's, as men, it's easy for us just to and then we continue, but there has to be a boundary. So, okay, it's not okay. Maybe your wife says, it's not okay if you just brush off things and then continue as if nothing happened. Like, I need to talk this through, even though you don't need to. So there has to be a boundary there to say, I can't just go on as if nothing happened. I need you to talk to me about this. I need to have a conversation about the argument or the disagreement or what you said. Like, okay, we've calmed down now, but I can't just continue. Like, okay, we had a fight in the afternoon, and now tonight we get into bed and it's all lovey-dovey all of a sudden, right? And it's like, and your wife's like, I can't do that. So there has to be boundaries to say, okay, before we can continue with the relationship just the way it is, we need to first deal with this.
Yeah, we need to get rid of the energy.
We can't just sweep it under the rug, right? So those are some examples of boundaries, and some of them you will only realize that they are needed as the relationship grows. Like, we don't know everything. You go into a relationship and you know, oh, we need to talk about expectations and those kind of things, but nothing can prepare you for marriage. Right? It's like, it's like, it's something that you have to just learn. You have to be in there, you have to grow, because it's a relationship, and every relationship is unique. There's no two marriages the same, no two friendships that are the same. Even in our own lives, none of my friendships are the same, and I can't treat my friendships the same way because they are different and they require different boundaries and different styles of relationship, communication, and so forth.
Yeah. No, I think I enjoy it that you are, you're just transparent as far as some of your challenges and how you approached setting up boundaries. And I want to quickly just also refer back to my own situation that I needed to set boundaries as far as fighting is concerned. Because I'm passionate about how people fight. It's a thing of mine, eh? I mean, like, I don't have a problem with you and I fighting, but I'm very, very particular about what you say and and what I say.
Yeah.
And because I'm very sensitive in terms of how I say, I'm also then very sensitive to what people are saying. I remember one of the discussions that I've had several times, and finally we actually had to bring it to, in a counseling session, where it was the situation of I'm a talker. I like to sort out my thinking through communication. So the more words I have in my mind, the easier it is for me to process things. On the other hand, my wife is the exact opposite. She likes to sit with whatever she's sitting with and just think about it. And if it's fine in her head, then she doesn't feel the need, for example, to take it up. But in the meantime, I'm going through torture because it's silent. It's silence. She's thinking about it, and for me, it comes across as silent treatment. It comes across as if she's not caring. But I understood that that's a process, that she prefers to sit with whatever she's struggling with and sit her alone. But part of the boundaries that I set to him, like, listen, this is how I am. So for me, I'd prefer that acknowledgement is crucial for me. So just because you're going through whatever, if you can't just dismiss me and pretend I'm not here, because for me, that's how you treat your enemy. That's a very adversarial attitude towards a person. So we need to set boundaries as far as that's concerned. And as far as how long, there's a point in your process where, for me, a line has been crossed and it's no longer a process, but now it has become an issue. Fine, be quiet for 1 day, be quiet even for 2 days, but we start going to the third day, for me, it's a problem. It becomes an issue. So you need to communicate to me and tell me where you're at. Find a way, find the courage, because I don't stop serving, I don't stop asking, do you need water, do you need food, do you need this, just because we're having a fight, because that's how I am. I'm not expecting you to be that way, but just understand, part of my process is that I don't want you to ever have a misunderstanding of my behavior because I've changed my behavior because we're fighting. I'm a firm believer in stability. So it's because we're fighting. I don't want confusion. I'm not going to change the way that I am. I'll continue doing the things that I'm doing so that we are still okay, even though there's something that we haven't resolved. And the least that I expect is some degree of reciprocity in whatever small measure to say, okay, it's fine. If you're hungry, don't say to me that you're not hungry. Say, at least I'm hungry. Eat the food angry, I don't care. But at least I acknowledge my gesture of extending that sort of the palm of peace. And so communicating, and then again being able to articulate your processes with people, I think is important, and I think you alluded to that as well. And as we're getting ready to shut down, because I've got a Zoom session at 2:00, how important it is it to communicate your process as a way of enabling boundaries in a relationship?
Well, it goes back to, I think, what I mentioned in the beginning, valuing the person and the relationship enough to explain yourself. Because if you want people to understand you, then you have to help them, because we're not the same.
Say that again. I like that. Say it again. Someone say it with their chest. Say it with power. Come on. Baptist preacher.
Too much pressure.
If you want people to know, to understand you, have to help them.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think that's one of the big problems, even in our country, concerning race, right? Is that we want the other race to understand us and to accept us, but we're not willing to help them. And maybe that's another discussion for another day.
Sure.
But I find it's very helpful when we ask questions of other people. So, okay, this is how I think. How do you think? Right? This is how I process what's happening, like you just mentioned, which is interesting because me and my wife, we're quite the opposite. Like, I'm the one that's quiet, and if it's okay in my head, then it's okay. And that's where that other boundary came in of, like, you can't just pretend like nothing happened, because for me it was like that's just how I thought I am. Like, okay, I'll deal with it on my own.
It's now okay in your head.
And I'm like, okay, I was angry at you. I had my fight with you in my head. and I forgave you, and I've settled it, and now I, like, hey, can I make you some coffee?
Like,
and it's
no.
she's like, what's wrong with you? But then it's like, okay, then we sat down, and she was like, my wife was like, how can you just go on like this? Like, actually, it's funny because the first time I proposed to her, it was literally the night before we had one of our first fights. And then the next morning I proposed to her. She was like, how can you propose to me? I'm still angry at and I'm like, what? I'm over that.
You didn't tell me about that. I would have given you some tips about that.
Wow, she did say no that time, but it's okay. We got engaged a couple of months later. But just sitting down and saying, okay, this is how I'm thinking. This is how I operate. This is who I am. When you do this, this is how I feel. When you say this, this is how I respond. Helping to understand the way that you do this. I think there's a great book on this is it Gary Chapman?
Yes.
On the 5 languages of love. Mm-hmm. And he talks a lot about that, like learning not only to understand your own language, but also understanding your partners or your friend. Like that extends into many relationships. Mm-hmm. But understanding, in this case, your spouse's language of love and understanding how do they operate so that you can perceive it that way. Because if I'm quiet and you're a talker, you perceive my being quiet as there's a problem.
As a snub, yeah.
Yeah, or like I'm giving you this. Or I perceive you much talking as just you're rambling, you're being emotional.
And annoying, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, for me, it's like I need space. I can't do a lot of talking. I'm just the opposite. Whereas my wife, she likes to talk things through, and that's fine. So we need to sit down and communicate that, and we need to start by valuing the relationship and saying, okay, look, you are important to me. This relationship is important to me. And that's why we need to have this conversation. And when I'm disagreeing with you, doesn't mean I don't love you or you're not important to me. And coming to that place where you have communicated enough so that even when you have a disagreement or a fight, you still know the relationship is safe.
Yeah.
Like for example, our friendship, we can have a disagreement and I'm not worried about our relationship because I know our relationship is mature enough where I'm your friend, you're my brother. Like even if we have a fight, even if we disagree, even if we don't see things the same way sometimes, that's not going to change that. We just need to work through this and figure it out so that we can understand each other, and that will then in turn help the relationship to grow again as well.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, I'm enjoying this conversation, but we have to bring it to an end.
Why do you have to be like that?
But
I thought you said
guys,
you like talking.
If you want us to have more conversations, please say it there in the comment sections. Let me know if you want us to have more conversations. The good thing about this particular situation where we're at is that actually it's a podcast, actually. So it's going to be on the 𝐁𝐂𝐂𝐂𝐂𝐂𝐂.
Yeah, we'll post it there on the 7X Growth podcast.
On the 7X Growth podcast.
Yeah.
7X Growth. So as soon as it's up on the 7X Growth, you can check it out on YouTube, 7X Growth podcast. 7X Growth.
I'll send it to you as well.
Yeah, 7X Growth podcast. It'll be put up on there. So you'll see us both properly in the studio setting. But I'd like to have more conversations with you, and then we can bring other people and talk about these important conversations. And from the amount of love, come on, keep on showing the love. If you want us to have more, let me know. Let me see the love.
Quiet.
You're showing the love to say, yeah. Gentlemen, it was a great conversation. Let's quickly check, and then we're going to shut it down.
So next time we can talk about what we said, boundaries in business. I think that's another big topic that's very difficult.
Yeah, professional boundaries. But I'm actually quite interested in what you just said now about how to fight. Because one of the viral videos that I had on TikTok was when I speak about ways of fighting.
Oh, yeah.
I think that'll be an interesting one. I think so. I think we should speak about how to fight, right? In relationships.
Rules of engagement.
The rules of engagement. How not to fight.
Don't commit war crimes in your marriage.
There we go. My sensitivity is with emails. That was from earlier on from Bitumelo.
Yeah.
I will call people out with substandard email mannerisms. That sounds scary. She says also that the quality of this live, wow! I love the fact that they can see your face in the camera.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Which is quite helpful. Know what you stand for, what you value, and never over-explain yourself with clarity. Explain yourself with clarity, confidence, and brevity. Fantastic. If it's so difficult for you to take small steps, build from there. If it's difficult for you to take small steps, build from there. Seek reciprocal, ask yourself if you're willing to give and what you need to get from a relationship. My husband is the same as Jabu. Sounds like a great guy. Like him already. Mr. J, please share the link for love languages. I don't have that right now, but you guys can Google it.
Yeah, just Google it. 5 Languages of Love by Gary Chapman.
Yes. The same. Please keep this coming, guys. We love them. So closing thoughts quickly. You've got 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Boundaries are healthy for your relationships. Don't be afraid of them. Learn how to set them and grow by them.
Fantastic. Exactly what he said, right?
How are you? Just Waroba.
We'll keep it at that, guys. We'll keep it at that. I think also for me, one of the reasons why I wanted to have this live is because I want you guys to see what I'm talking about. Sometimes when I speak about the people that I know, that I live with, it sounds like I'm bragging, or it sounds very far-fetched. I think it's important in our country of South Africa to start having conversations that are healthy, that can help to build our communities. And especially as a Christian, really conversations that exhibit God's love in a more real way, not in a religious way, in a way that's condemning or judgmental, but in a way that shows that, you know what, for me as a Christian, I do what I'm doing because of everything that I've learned through Christianity. Everything that I've learned through Christianity is who I have become. At least the version that I know is a version of love, of understanding, of forgiveness and compassion, and of just being real about who you are as a person, not trying to over curate yourself to be something that you're not, as per the opening lines. So thank you so much, guys. I've got to go. Unfortunately, again, I've got a Zoom session at 2 o'clock. I know the live was short, as some of you are already complaining about it. I know it was short, although it was actually almost an hour. But it was short. We'll definitely be having a lot more. I'll have Pastor Gerold again. Maybe we can make an appointment again next week.
Yeah, that's a good.
And then maybe we can plan to have it at least an hour, 15 minutes, even an hour, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And
if we book it, then it's good.
Yeah, and we'll try and have hopefully by that time, TikTok has a far better setting, or maybe we're able to do that desktop
because
thing and do it
we
live.
have the camera set up here as well, so.
Live studio.
Yeah, the live studio.
The live studio. Yes, and then of course, I think ultimately that's what we're going to do. We're going to have live studio discussions, right? Which would be fantastic. But remember again, 24th of February, guys, we have the Become an Articulate Communicator seminar happening on the 24th. It's happening here on the 𝐁𝐔𝐒𝐿 Growth Center, which is here in Menlyn, across Menlyn Shopping Mall. Please do go on the website www.𝐁𝐿7.com, 𝐁𝐿7.com. Book your tickets. Remember, live tickets are limited, guys. They are limited, so you need to move. $7.50 because we're going to give you a bit of snacks and lunch for that. But then online, virtual, because we've got this high quality cameras, and you will enjoy the live action even though you're not here, and that's 500 Rand for you. And then of course after that there'll be other packages that we're going to be able to offer you guys. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please say bye to everybody. Pastor Gerold.
Cheers. Enjoy your day.
Pastor
Thank
G is
you.
also here on TikTok as well.
Hey.
Check out 𝐁𝐿7, 𝐁𝐿7, the number 7 on TikTok here as well. I've shared this a few times before. Or search for Gerold Joubert. Take care, guys. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.